Hey guys, welcome to another Double Tap on YouTube. I am Stephen Scott. With me today, he is known as the Blind Filmmaker. He's a friend of mine, I'm pleased to say, and a friend of Double Tap as well. It is great to have returning champion James Rath back with us. But now on YouTube. James, welcome to YouTube. Isn't it nice here?
I love YouTube. I feel like home. Yeah, it's great.
Well, it is your home. We're going to talk about that a bit later. Yeah, it is it's returning home, I think it's fair to say. So we'll come back and talk about that in a moment. But we're here today because I want to talk to you about Vision Pro, because you have had hands-on, or head-on with it. I don't know what the right phrase is, but you've been wearing it in the store. Yeah, you got hands-on.
Yeah, Apple Vision Pro. It was a very interesting. I was skeptical. I think like many people, I was skeptical when it was announced. Thought it was cool. I mean, I love VR. I've outside of content creation and filmmaking, I also do accessibility video game consulting with PlayStation. A lot of their AAA titles that have been award-winning, as well as I got to work on a VR game, which is always a fun surprise for I think a visually impaired and blind gamer. But Casmonius High it's from the same people that make Job Simulator, which is now coming to Apple Vision Pro. So the game that I helped make, potentially, this is not confirmed. I think they want to see how their top game does, but the game that I helped make, visually impaired accessible, might be coming to Vision Pro too. So that'd be really neat. Yeah.
So tell me about the first wearing of this, because you get it in the store, you try it on in the store, right? And you filmed yourself doing this, as a lot of people were doing, but obviously I think more of us were interested in what you had to say from the low vision perspective, the blind perspective. So, I've already put as people will know if they watch this channel, they will know my view on this, which is this is not something that I would necessarily rush out and buy as someone who has not much in the way of useful vision left. But you actually had quite the opposite experience from the low vision perspective.
Yeah. So from my perspective, I've used VR before. I own a Quest 2. And there are things I can see and there are things I cannot see in it. And what I will say is I can see a little bit more in my Quest 2 than, just with my eyes looking around the world around me. And that is because it's bringing a world very close to my eyes. And with my particular situation, I am under ocular albinism, nystagmus. My retinas are underdeveloped. So there is still a little bit of visual information that can come into my eyes. A lot of it is blurry and a little overexposed with the colors, but if it comes within like a few inches, it's just a little bit more. It's still considered by the benchmarks legally blind.
Yes.
Even when it's a couple inches from my face, but it's a little less blind than anything that's like past 6 inches from my face. So that's where the benefit of VR comes to me, is it can bring that world close to me. Now, there's still the issue where a lot of developers, right, will still now realize like, I don't know all the full technical details with like field of view and focal length, and I'm not going to act like an expert on that. But what I will say is typically with VR apps, you will see that developers feel like now they can make things smaller or text size smaller, because it's like, it's right there, but it's easier to see. And it's like sometimes, but it still needs to be at a decent font or scalable. Like it when you're in VR, it emulates this depth that, it's not really, it's a trick. It's like 3D, but you can sometimes, depending on the application and platform, you can bring windows further or closer to you. There are some developers who have a fixed range, and all you can do is walk. If you walk up closer to it, it walks away from you pretty much. Like it floats away, because it's always at a fixed range. And there are apps, at least in metas, because they have no zoom or screen reader, that I just can't use because I'll never be able to see that text, and there's no way to magnify it.
And you can't get close to it. You can't even peer into it.
So every time
stage.
I try to, it's just it goes further away from me.
Yeah,
Now there are some apps that don't do that, and they're wonderful. The Quest can be a great experience sometimes for me, but it's an inconsistent one, and that's where I'm a little bit more, I think, hopeful with the Vision Pro. Is because Apple is shipping this with the zoom feature, with voiceover, with even just simple select to speak screen, much higher large text options than what's offered, and a reduced white point, all these things that are just like right there built in. I was definitely a bit more hopeful with this thing. And then there was eye tracking, and I have nystagmus. And many of us blind visually impaired folks who have nystagmus should fear eye tracking, because I watched it firsthand. So yes, I could see better through the Vision Pro. It's a very high resolution display, almost like a 4K display right up to your eye. And then it's got these cameras that are pretty high res. They're almost like a smartphone, maybe a couple generations behind, but there's a little bit different things going on. You can't really compare it to a smartphone camera because it is moving at 90 hertz per second. So it's moving quite faster at capturing things, and it's adjusting. It almost like nothing looks warped. That's the weird part about it. Is it you just put it on and it almost like, and I know someone who has 20/20 vision, someone who's not vision impaired, will certainly be like, oh, it looks worse than my eyes, I guess I can get used to this, but then for me, it's like I put it on, like, no, things are clear. These cameras are better than my eyes, much better, and now
But actually, some of the reviews I read said exactly that, though. They said that they were amazed at how good and how clear everything was. So what you're experiencing was kind of what they were experiencing as well, I guess. They were able to see, maybe not so much more in their case, but they didn't notice a huge difference. And I think that is definitely down to the cameras and the technology that are inside this thing.
Yeah, and I know some folks who definitely are like not vision impaired at all will be able to just like be like write it off and be like, they work and they're fine. It's passable.
Yeah.
Even Snazzy Labs, who is a tech YouTuber, he did a whole video like trying to go more into detail, and he gets quite technical with some of his stuff. And he did compliment some parts of the camera. And he's like, this is probably one of the best pass-throughs on any headset at the moment, but it's far from good. And I gotta say that people, and his words, not mine, I'm paraphrasing, but he did say, the people who are raving about this, I don't mean to be offensive to you, but you might be legally blind. And you know what? All I did was like, yeah, and it's fantastic, and I love it.
Because you're seeing more. You're seeing more than you've seen before. Can I ask you, have you tried? I mean, you mentioned you tried Meta, and of course that's an appropriate equivalent of Vision Pro at the moment, right? But there are lots of other products out there which are built for blind and low vision people. Like I'm immediately thinking about eSight, and there are others as well. Have you tried any of those in your time?
Yep.
Can you think about the comparison? Because I'm intrigued to know what you think compared to, say, something like eSight versus Vision Pro. I know they're vastly different products, but I think in that sense of improving vision, that's what eSight's sold as. Apple Vision Pro isn't, but it clearly did for you.
Yeah, and so I tried an eSight back when it was like the old big black model, before it went to this like white, trying to be a little more sleeker looking. It's still, we can say Vision Pro, it's ridiculous, but if you're in the low vision, legally blind world, you've seen ridiculous headsets for the last decade. But again, it's cool tech, and I think it's great for those it works for, and I'm not knocking it by any means by like, hey, yeah, it lets me zoom in on the world around me and adjust contrast. I think the cameras in it, I haven't used the newer versions, but I assume they don't get updated right as much as like something like an Apple product who, they're supplying the latest Sony mobile camera chipsets and whatnot. So I imagine the cameras aren't as great of quality as they could be. You're right, and that's
let's be honest, that's partly down to the amount of R&D that Apple has in comparison to budget. I mean, in terms of what a company like eSight can do.
Yeah, and then the issue then you run into is like these are niche accessibility assistive aid devices, and in a lot of countries, U.S. including, our insurance won't cover anything for blind people. It's and I learned this when I was filming my travel show in Germany. Germany covers quite a few, like a white cane. You can get that. But then like here, we'll give you some tax write-offs, but that's about it. And you're on your own though for everything else. Go find a nonprofit or a center for the blind. Good luck if you're in a rural area in middle America. But yeah, it's interesting. So I got all these comments on my Vision Pro video going like, oh man, this helps you see. that's a write-off for your health insurance. I'm like,
no,
not quite.
no, not really.
No, that's not how that works here. So anyway, yeah, it's with the eSite and other, again, I'm not, they don't even want to sponsor me because they don't want to pay my rate. I've been in that conversation with them quite a few times, every time they reach out every few years. But
yeah, but look, it's fair to say that it didn't work for you, and I know people it has worked for, as I'm sure you do, and that's brilliant.
Worked, but not for the price. I think that's the thing. That's my bottom line. Is look, the eSite for the price, that doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
When you're talking Vision Pro, I mean, I did mention in my video, like, look, I don't want to pay for this right now. Maybe in the next like generation or two, I could probably justify it as a consumer. As a content creator, things are a little bit different because you know, I trying to find a way to make more content around it. It obviously did well, making like a little bit of revenue from this video that I did of just my try-on experience. And people are asking for more content around it. So, but as a consumer, yeah, I'd probably wait for it to get sleeker and smaller and maybe even a price down. You know, we look at the iPad, Apple Watch, the iPhone. Things went down in price by the second gen. And not only that, they usually had a radical redesign.
Well, that's right. And let's be honest, this is going to be about Gen 2, Gen 3, even perhaps I've seen some people say Gen 4, before this really becomes a product. Look, what everyone wants is the glasses that I'm wearing, that you're wearing. You know, we want
them now, but I do have the Meta Ray-Bans.
Ah, yes. Well, I've got those too. I'm not wearing them either. Do you know why? Because they don't stop talking. Mine's just talk all the time. I constantly get. It's because it's the WhatsApp messages. Anytime a WhatsApp message comes through, it's constantly telling me.
Customize that. I turn off most messages unless it's like a text or incoming.
I have to play with it more because honestly, it is just driving me mad. But honestly, you know, that's what people want, right? They want that with the heads up display. They want all the information coming through. That kind of device. And we're nowhere near that at the moment. Doing well with cameras, doing well with audio, but it's a long way to go. I do want to ask you though, because this point about the eSite, I bring it up not just from the hardware perspective, but I have a view on this that companies like eSite and others, they need to be developing for Apple Vision Pro, right? They need to be moving away from their own hardware designs that cost thousands upon thousands and thousands of dollars and actually move towards this kind of device. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, when you compare the prices to like an eSite versus a Vision Pro, I'd rather get a Vision Pro that has an M2 chip and 1,000 apps, you know, right at the gate. Now, what I will say, and this has been confirmed by developers at this time, this is where I would also maybe let some visually impaired folks like wait to get this. Developers don't have access to the cameras in the Vision Pro at the moment, and it's the same thing.
That's still the case.
Yeah,
I heard that at the beginning when it was announced a year ago. I didn't realize it was still the case.
Yeah, and it might be a little bit until, I mean, DC, they might announce something changing. I'm hoping I will talk to Apple as much as I personally can.
Yeah,
people who I know there, be like, hey, this could be game changing for magnification apps and things like being able to map. Here's one thing I think about too for apps. Looking at my living room, you know, it's a blur of colors. But with the Vision Pro, yes, it gets a little bit clearer, but also being able to do something like high contrast mode like we have in video games for PlayStation games like Last of Us, where suddenly my couch or a seat, right, it can recognize the objects that are for sitting. I can make those green. I can look at my table and that turns orange. So I can tell like what a surface is. And maybe I can scan my keys, right? My keys are suddenly this like bright purple and I don't lose my keys anymore. Those are the things I think about and how a heads-up display like this could really be game-changing for visually impaired and blind folks.
And for the entertainment, I mean, you obviously want to enjoy content on it as well. And that's your point, right? That you can buy this device. It has all the accessibility features, potentially, down the line. But also you can sit there and enjoy a Netflix movie or enjoy whatever you want to watch in a huge screen that, you know, you couldn't possibly fill your wall with.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that excites me. Just being able, I literally went out, I don't care that it was 720p and like, you know, low res. I just needed to be as big as possible. And I bought a projector that was fairly cheap on Black Friday. I think it was like $70, but it like, you know, as long as it's dark in my apartment, I got blackout curtains because I got albinism anyway. It works fantastically. I love it.
Well, that's one thing I really want to ask you about is that light sensitivity, because that's something I am constantly clouded by. I'm not going to spend $3,500 for a pair of blackout curtains for my eyes, but I can see you certainly benefiting from this. And I'm guessing because this was how it was kind of presented in the initial marketing a year ago, when they kind of presented it as you could almost dull your environment down, you could bring the light down. Is that true? Is that possible? So you can really customize your environment through the device?
Yeah, like you can change the level of immersion. Now, the one thing I will note, and I was actually warned about this before going into my demo, at least as of right now, the way the current setup is for the setting up the eye calibration for the eye tracking, which again you can, as I demonstrate in the longer form of my video, you can switch the eye tracking to like head tracking or wrist or hand finger. But one of the things you have to go through with the tutorial and the setup is a very bright white screen. And that was a little I don't know, it was a little fatiguing on my eyes for how long you had to kind of look at it. Now, luckily, you could access the accessibility menu beforehand and you could reduce white point. And I highly recommend most people who have like photophobia enable that option because it will reduce how bright whites are on it. And I would at least down 3 levels, but experiment with more depending on your retinas. But overall, I think just wearing it casually with a pass-through, and even not just a pass-through, but when you're in VR, like playing with the contrast settings, that could be very helpful for a lot of people, especially if you can get to a point where you can customize things like color filters, right? Which you can, I think, for some color blindness, and then you could probably grayscale too, I imagine. I had never looked into the color filters with my limited time, but hopefully once I get more eyes on it within the next week here, can explore.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant. And the other thing that got me was I watched that video by Brian Tong when he went through the sort of accessibility menus and all the list of all the menus, and he mentioned one that I was asking about from day one, which was, what happens if you only have one eye? How does that work? And there was even an option for that eye input. You could choose one left, right. I mean, obviously left or right. There's not many other choices, but left or right. And I thought that's incredible. Just again the fact they've thought of this in Gen 1 or Gen 0, arguably. I think is absolutely amazing. I can't wait to hear more from you when you get it. We'll be following you online as we do. Tell us what you're up to, though, because you've got you're back on YouTube. You're making more content there. Tell us about that.
Yeah, last 2 years, I've been working on a travel documentary series. Had a few videos in between, but it was inconsistent, and was working on Spider-Man 2 for PlayStation 5. So I was juggling quite a few projects, but my travel show is now out on Curiosity Stream. It's called Blind Spots. 10 episodes, really fun. Some of my favorite episodes were definitely Japan, Switzerland. Great times.
I saw you mentioning a lot on various platforms about Japan. You loved Japan, didn't you?
Loved it. I stayed back longer. My crew left, and I decided to stay an additional month or month.
Why wouldn't you, right? I mean, why wouldn't you? It sounds like an amazing place.
Well, I did climb Mount Fuji personally because it kept getting pushed back by the weather. But I had some wild, and I made a TikTok about this too, and that kind of blew up on IG Reels and TikTok. But I encountered my old high school friend who was a foreign exchange student to America from South Korea, and him and I used to make films together and put them in film student film festivals. So we used to make movies in our last 2 years of high school. And I lost contact with him because his name on social media was in Korean characters, and I couldn't search that or find that. And he's very quiet on social media. He doesn't post too often. So I just lost contact for the last 5 years. And then I'm meeting up with this content creator friend who I met online, Lisa, at a Starbucks. I'm late because there's 5 different Starbucks all in this one strip in Shibuya, and I'm going to the wrong one. And then very nice Japanese fashion designer guy is carrying my bag for me. I'm like, you don't have to do that. And he's walking me all the way down the street, going up 6 stories of this mall because the elevator's out, and help me get to my friend. I'm super nice people, fantastic, wonderful country. And then it turns out this guy that she was telling me like keeps like hitting on her is I meet up with her, and then it's my friend. I just hear my name. I'm like, James Rath. I'm like, that sounds like Hunter.
I know this guy.
So I made this whole TikTok about it and like my reaction live as it's happening. And it was just this bizarre, like, of all the places, he's from South Korea. He's just traveling in a small little duffel bag around Tokyo.
That's amazing.
It was wild. So I had a friend to hang out with for at least the last couple of weeks I was there, because we kept meeting up.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Other than that, YouTube, I put out a video about like my journey going to Mount Fuji, climbing that as a person with legal blindness in the off season when it's like snowing and windy. And I only really wanted to climb up there because I wanted to finish the video game Pokemon Gold that inspired my travel, my desire to travel since I was a kid. And Pokemon is based on real geographical locations. It was the first game that was actually accessible for someone like me with a magnifying glass, because it let me take my time. And Mount Fuji also let me take my time to get up the mountain, the wonderful guide, and I beat the game on the mountain. And that was just like, and the game also ends on that mountain too in the game. So it was just like this whole homage to my childhood. And so that was great. And I got to work with like a YouTube musical artist for an original song for that video too. It's a little documentary. So there's just a lot of heart and soul that went into that video. And I know it's not for everyone. So it's like this mix of a travel vlog and gameplay and like, personal.
It's fascinating though. It's fascinating. I love hearing these stories. It's so interesting. How do we find you on YouTube? That's the question.
YouTube.com/James Rath. And by the time this is up, we'll have my latest video, which is a story of how I met, a friend who became my girlfriend in the metaverse. And
oh, wow.
It's a very interesting story. It's we met just because I was making a YouTube video about how would blind people react, or how would people in the metaverse react to a blind guy trying to find friends and connection. And the story went in a direction I never would have expected. So.
Well, it's funny. We just did a video recently about online dating, and I feel that this is how old I am. I feel that's so new, and yet you're meeting people in the metaverse. This is just unbelievable.
It was love at first sight.
Love at first sound.
No.
Maybe it was.
Friends. It was a friendship, and we didn't really explore that until like I got back from Japan, and it was
amazing. Well, congratulations. That's really nice. That's a lovely story. James, stick around, because next time here on Double Tap on YouTube, we'll be continuing our conversation talking about AI from 2 points of view, one video and Apple's vision for AI. That coming up on the next episode of Double Tap on YouTube. Don't forget, you can like, you can subscribe, you can comment, and of course we'll reply as well. Keep in touch with us also on email, feedback@doubletaponair.com, or call us and leave a voicemail the old-fashioned way, the good old-fashioned way, 1-877-803-4567. We'll catch you next time for another episode.